Hello and welcome to the ArtsR4Life Virtual Professional Development Series.
In this module, you will raise your understanding as you blow the roof off of your standards-based lesson planning and become more confident in implementing the standards. We will explore cognitive processes, knowledge dimensions, student growth, and standards articulation. You will also be introduced to resources to support understanding of the standards and hear from several arts educators about how they use the standards in their everyday instruction. What do students need to know, understand, and be able to do to ensure their success in the future, whether it be the next class, post-secondary, or the world of work? This was the essential question used to drive the work of the revision of the North Carolina Arts Education Standards in 2010, and it continues to be a useful question when planning for instruction today. Certain criteria were used for filtering the development of these central standards in all subject areas. They were endurance, which helped the writers to focus on knowledge and skills valuable beyond just one test. Leverage filter screened for knowledge and skills that were valuable in multiple disciplines. And readiness helped discover knowledge and skills necessary for success at the next level of instruction. This is why so many of the standards and clarifying objectives articulate from course to course. More about that later. The Arts Education Essential Standards are organized by strands. Strands provide common threads of understanding that cut across all grade levels for each arts education discipline. Within each strand are standards and clarifying objectives. There are less than 10 essential standards per discipline, 2 to 5 clarifying objectives per essential standard, and they're organized to embed multiple entry points. In other words, when teaching, you do not have to start or end with any particular strand, standard, or clarifying objective. Remember that the essential standards for arts education communicate what students should know and be able to do as a result of instruction at each grade level or proficiency level. Because of the broad base of knowledge and skills involved in creating, performing, responding to, and understanding the arts, experiences and learning must occur in a sequential manner. This table illustrates the format for decoding the essential standards. Note that the standards are organized under a large heading, Musical Literacy. Musical literacy is the strand for this particular essential standard. Look more closely and you will see that for Objective 4ML 1.3, the number 4 lets the viewer know that you are viewing a Grade 4 standard. The ML indicates the strand, which is musical literacy. The 1 indicates that the viewer is looking at the first essential standard under musical literacy, which reads, apply the elements of music and musical techniques in order to sing and play music with accuracy and expression. The 3 indicates that this is the third clarifying objective within this standard, which reads, use voice and or instruments to execute melodic movement through pentatonic melodies on the treble staff. Now, we're going to review several virtual resources for the standards. If you want to explore these resources on your own at a later point, there will be a page towards the end of this module listing all URLs. They are also hot linked on the Virtual PD Series page on the Wiki. Of course, you can always just pause the video at any time and use the Google shortened URLs on the screen to start exploring right away. So, what are we looking at now? This is the official NCDPI Arts Education webpage. To the left are links to the Standard Course of Study page, an FAQ section, and a link to our next resource, the NCDPI Arts Education Wiki space. If you want, stop the video now to go to the NCDPI webpage using the Google URL on the screen. The NCDPI Arts Education Wiki space holds many helpful tools and materials for teachers. If you click on the North Carolina Standard Course of Study and Instructional Tools, you'll find a link to the North Carolina Standard Course of Study for all subject areas and instructional tools. If you want, stop the video now to go to the NCDPI Wiki space homepage using the Google URL on the screen. On this North Carolina Standard Course of Study page is a link to standards for all areas. Please note that on the bottom is a link to a master document for arts education. That includes the Arts Education Preamble, the North Carolina Essential Standards for all 4 arts disciplines, crosswalk instructional tools for all 4 arts disciplines, unpacking the standards instructional tools for all 4 arts disciplines, links to many other content area standards such as ESL, mathematics, CTE, guidance, healthful living, information technology, etc. Links to the ELA standards, the North Carolina Mathematics Standard Course of Study, and the Extended Content Standards. If you want, stop the video now to go to the NCDPI Standards Course of Study page using the Google URL on the screen. On the K-12 Instructional Tools page, you'll find links to a plethora of helpful materials. The crosswalk documents compare the current 2010 Standard Course of Study to older standards. The unpacking documents demonstrate at a granular level the knowledge and skills students are expected to master at a particular grade. The I CAN statements are the standards organized in grade spans in student I CAN statements. Glossary of Terms is a glossary providing definitions of content-specific terms used in the standards documents. Excel spreadsheets are objectives in an interactive spreadsheet divided into discipline and level for your convenience. They are searchable by keyword and Bloom's taxonomy. Arts Education Preamble, Introduction to the North Carolina Arts Education Essential Standards. Graphic organizers. These visual representations assist the student in organizing abstract, big-picture information. North Carolina Arts Education Master Packet provides a master document for all 4 arts disciplines, which includes the preamble, crosswalks, unpacking, and standards for dance, music, theater arts, and visual arts. They are print-ready for use in local schools or school systems. Quick reference guides for the North Carolina Standard Course of Study. The quick reference guides for the North Carolina Standard Course of Study are available in sets for K-5 or 6-8 and serve as a resource for teachers as they plan instruction to implement the North Carolina Standard Course of Study across multiple disciplines. They are available free as a PDF download. If you want, stop the video now to go to the K-12 Instructional Tools page using the Google URL on the screen. Now, let's take a look at the Unpacking the Standards documents, which support teachers in their understanding of the essential standards. The unpacking documents demonstrate the knowledge and skills that students are expected to master at a particular grade through a comparison of strands, essential standards, and clarifying objectives by grade span. There are also narrative examples of classroom implementation. There is a narrative at the end of each section that goes into detail about what learning a student should have with these essential standards and clarifying objectives at a specific grade span. This is very important information when trying to prepare lessons for your students. Now it's time to stop and reflect on the following question. How do you use the standards and the standards support tools to ensure student success in the future, whether it be the next class, post-secondary, or the world of work? Take about 10 minutes by yourself or in a group. Welcome back. Now let's take a deeper look at some real clarifying objectives from elementary visual arts, high school orchestra, and middle school theater arts. What do you think these objectives are asking the students to do? For the first example, it's not enough that students know that art reflects the artist's personal voice and choices. This objective wants the student to create art that reflects their personal voices and choices. For the second objective, it is not enough that students know that music be made from traditional and non-traditional sound, notational, and technological sources. This objective requires students to construct music examples themselves that embrace these ideas. And finally, it's not enough that students know that plays have themes, characters, conflict, dialogues, mood, and atmosphere. This objective directs students to analyze plays themselves for these essential elements. How do we actually know what each of these objectives mean? It helps to know more about Revised Bloom's taxonomy, because all of the clarifying objectives begin with cognitive process verbs. Everyone, of course, knows Bloom's taxonomy, but it's important to distinguish between the original from 1956 and Revised Bloom's taxonomy from 2001. Some of the more obvious changes between the two versions are the original terms of knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, evaluation were in noun form. In the revised version, the names of 6 major categories were changed from noun to verb. The subcategories of the 6 major categories were also replaced by verbs, and some subcategories were reorganized. Synthesis was renamed creating in order to better reflect the nature of the thinking described, and evaluating and the new creating swapped places. In Revised Bloom's taxonomy, there are 6 cognitive processes and many more subcategories or subverbs. The first cognitive process is remember. It means to retrieve relevant knowledge from long-term memory, like this trivia question. The second cognitive process is understand. It means to construct meaning from instructional messages, including oral, written, like this essay question. The third cognitive process is apply, and it means to carry out or use a procedure in a given situation, like this instruction from a recipe. The fourth cognitive process is analyze, and it means to break material into its constituent parts and determine how the parts relate to one another, into an overall structure or purpose. A lot of real and fictional detectives use analysis to solve crimes. The fifth cognitive process is evaluate, and it requires students to make judgments based on criteria and standards, like in this prompt asking personal opinions about 3 performances. Finally, we have create, and as you know, it means to put elements together to form a coherent or functional whole, or to reorganize elements into a new pattern or structure. It is often confused with apply. Each of the 6 cognitive process verbs has subverbs or subcategories that are used in the clarifying objective. For remember, the subverbs are recognize, identify, recall, and retrieve. For more information on subcategories or subverbs, go to the Arts Education Wiki space, and on the Revised Bloom's Taxonomy page, download the PDF entitled RBT Cognitive Processes and Knowledge Dimensions. Use the Google URL on the screen to go to the Wiki space and download right now. Knowledge dimension is another aspect in play when attempting to understand the standards. Knowledge dimension refers to the type of knowledge that you want students to acquire. There are 4 types: factual, conceptual, procedural, and metacognitive. Factual is, well, basic factual information. Conceptual involves concepts, theories, and categories. Procedural is about processes. Metacognitive is about knowing oneself or about thinking about thinking. Many of these categories are self-evident, but when you plan your lessons while using the knowledge dimensions, you start to see their value. A lesson which asks students to recall basic factual information in American history is fundamentally different from asking the same student to recall a process in chemistry, even though they are both under the cognitive process of remember. Likewise, asking a student to create a single work of art is different from compiling a dance portfolio for college. The difference between the dimensions is more clear when you plot objectives out on the grid on your screen. For example, Theater Arts KA 1.1, recall the basic parts of story such as character, settings, and event, requires kindergarten students to recall, so it is a remember. It also requires students to recall basic information, so it's factual knowledge. Dance 7 CP 2.3, use self-assessment, teacher feedback, and peer feedback to refine dance performance quality, asks second grade students to use, which makes this the cognitive process apply. It is asking for knowledge of the self from various sources, which makes the knowledge dimension metacognitive. Visual Arts AV 3.2, produce art by using a variety of processes appropriately, safely, and effectively, is a create because produce is a subverb of create. The focus is on process, so it is in the procedural knowledge dimension. Music 7 MR 1.2. Analyze oral music examples representing diverse genres, styles, and cultures using appropriate music terminology is clearly an analyze. The knowledge dimension is conceptual because it is focused on ideas and not discrete facts, processes, or the self. Finally, why is it important for students, teachers, or parents to understand the sequence of learning across the K-12 continuum? So that teachers can differentiate instruction for students who have gaps in the continuum. So that students know what they have learned and what's coming ahead and can set goals to progress with their learning. So that teachers, students, and parents know what comes before and after in the continuum and to understand the big picture of what students should know and be able to do. To explore this issue of articulation, we're going to take a look now at dance to see learning progressions, K through 12, through a single discipline in North Carolina. At the early elementary or K through 2 level, students should be able to recognize and use basic elements of movement, including body, time, space, and energy. Through the creative process, they use exploration and teacher-led improvisation to combine the dance elements into dance phrases. At the upper elementary, or 3 through 5 level, students organize dance phrases into simple dance sequences that have a beginning, middle, and end, and that vary the use of the dance elements. For example, students may create 3 dance phrases that use a common movement vocabulary but vary time, space, and energy, and then organize the phrases into a dance sequence. Note that the learning has progressed from simple recognition of the elements and the creation of a dance phrase into the varied use of the elements in a simple dance sequence. At the middle grades, or 6 through 8, students use a variety of approaches such as musical, literary, or visual forms to choreograph dances. For example, they may use a source for inspiration, such as a poem, short piece of music, a piece of artwork, to create dance. They create dances that fulfill aesthetic criteria, use variety in the elements of dance, show artistic form, and communicate the intent of the choreographer. They organize dance sequences into simple dances that communicate ideas, experiences, feelings, images, or stories. Note that the learning has progressed here from the organization of simple dance sequences into the choreography of simple dances that fulfill a wide variety of criteria. At the high school, or 9 through 12 level, students should be able to create dances using selected dance elements, choreographic principles, structures, processes, and production elements to fulfill choreographic intent and meet aesthetic criteria. For example, students may select a poem as a basis for choreographic intent. With a partner or small group, they create a short dance focusing on the dance elements of body and energy, the choreographic principles of unity and repetition, and the choreographic structure of the poem. They create dances that use a variety of forms such as ABA, canon, or theme and variation. For organizational structure, and analyze musical forms as a basis for choreographing dances. Students use aesthetic criteria to evaluate and revise choreography, generate innovative solutions to movement problems, and analyze the communication of meaning in personal dances. Students create dance for a performance based on ideas, experiences, feelings, concepts, images, or narratives. They have personal meaning or social significance. All creative choices are clearly guided by the choreographer's intent and aesthetic perspective. Note that by the time students achieve the advanced level high school dance standards, they are able to synthesize all of the components from the preceding levels and manipulate the dance elements in a variety of ways to choreograph dances. This graphic illustrates how the sequence of the clarifying objectives for CP1 in dance reflects an increasingly more challenging application of concepts, leading to student proficiency across the K-12 continuum. Now it is time to stop and reflect on the following question. How does learning progress through any one arts education discipline? Pick one standard and take 10 to 15 minutes to discuss on your own or in a group. We would like to shift focus now to the classroom environment with educators representing all 4 arts education disciplines. Let's hear what they have to say about standards in their everyday classroom instruction. First up is Kate Cummings, and she will tell us about middle and high school dance.
Hi, my name is Kate Cummings. I'm the dance educator at Daniels Magnet Middle School in Raleigh, North Carolina. When it comes to lesson planning and using the dance essential standards, I like to organize the clarifying objectives into units throughout my 18-week course. I teach middle school intro to dance as I'm building a newly formed dance program. So for example, one unit that I just finished up recently really was organized to focus on creation performance clarifying objective 2.3, which is use of abstracted movement to create dance phrases that communicate ideas, experiences, feelings, or images. Dance movement clarifying objective 1.2, compare qualities within the elements of time, space, weight, and flow in dance. And the last one was creation performance clarifying objective 1.4. Use collaborative and cooperative skills to contribute constructively to the creation of dance. Students were assigned one of the basic emotions and choreographed a composition that had purposeful pathways, levels, and directions. And during this process, students experimented with different ideas of abstract and literal movements that they connect to different emotions. And through there, they would decide what shapes or levels could they match with that emotion that would make sense to the audience member. That would be an example of how we used standards grouped together into a unit to not only collaborate together, abstract ideas demonstrated through dance movement, and then connecting it to the space element. And that's only of the 3 clarifying objectives that I used for that unit. I like to keep the clarifying objectives for each unit at the top of the assessment, whether I'm assessing technique, composition, dance history. Every time there's a written test, I keep a rubric with all the clarifying objectives at the top. This makes it transparent to the students so they see exactly what they are learning, how they're going to be assessed, but it also helps them keep progress and growth. At the end of the semester or even the year, they collect all their stuff together into a portfolio. And then at the high school level, I've done this, and now I'm starting this at the middle school level. They have folders that they keep all of their rubrics, all their written vocabulary tests, their journal entries, assessing and reflecting on their composition, and they can reflect at the end of the year. A lot of my seniors, when I taught at high school, they're amazed by the amount of growth in terms of their writing skills, reflecting on their composition, their technique, what have they learned about dance, who they've learned about, what major works and compositions, and they're really impressed by the end. It's something that is great for building confidence, but also so that students see the worth of their education in the arts, because not only are we preparing some students to be dancers, but I feel that we as educators for dance should create all students into lifelong appreciation of the arts. Every single day that a student walks through that door, there should be a planned, purposeful standard that is met, whether it's one or several, used for instruction. Different dance programs have different needs throughout the state, and especially for each grade level. So for example, if you do have a performance coming up and it's rehearsal day, your students can still learn through peer assessment, understanding teacher feedback, and how that relates to the rehearsal process, and learning about different etiquette as a dancer and as an audience member. Those all relate back to dance movement standards.
Now let's check in with JANA Winders. JANA is an elementary music teacher in Wilson, North Carolina.
Hi, my name is JANA Winders, and I teach K-5 general music in Wilson County Schools, and I'm here to talk to you today about how you can use our essential standards in your day-to-day instruction. I'll start first with lesson planning. What I do, our county doesn't per se have a pacing guide for the arts classes, so I went out on my own and found great pacing guides in Pitt County schools, in Iredell Statesville schools, and so I happen to use pacing guides from those two counties, and I kind of just look and pick and choose, and it gave me a starting point. And I've been working on these long-range plans with a blogger from Organized Chaos. She's amazing, and she leads you through a process of taking the standards and breaking them down all the way to your daily lesson plans. So what I do is I take my essential standards and I look at each grade level and I break down what standards they need to cover in which 9 weeks. And then I come and I go back and I take those standards and I look at, by the end of kindergarten, out of those standards, what should my children be able to accomplish? You know, by the end of kindergarten, they should be able to keep a steady beat, maintain a steady beat. They should be able to recognize the difference between high and low and fast and slow. And I jot all of that out in a chart. And then I go to the next step. I take month by month and I put in the units that I teach every single year. Like, I love to do Carnival of the Animals with kindergarten and first grade. With kindergarten, I love to do Peter and the Wolf with first grade. I love to do the Nutcracker with second grade. And so I plug in these units that I do with each grade level every single year, kind of my bag of tricks. And then I look in those units and I'm able to pick out ways to incorporate the standards with those units. And then it leaves me these empty spots where I can go in and fit lessons for each of those standards. And I know it's difficult to assess. I teach almost 600 kids, and I see them once a week for 45 minutes. So I have found ways to informally and formally assess the children so that I can see if they're learning this standard. If I give an assessment and I've taught my heart out for 5 weeks and then I have only 40% of my class to pass the assessment, then I know that I need to regroup and go back and do something else with this standard, because I've got 60% of my kids who don't understand what's going on. So I use those standards when I'm looking at assessment to see if I've done teaching, if I've done all I needed to do so that that child knows that standard.
For some theater arts insight, let's go to Green Hope High School and talk to Jamie Gorsky, theater educator.
Hi, my name is Jamie Gorsky. I am the theater arts teacher over at Green Hope High School in Cary, North Carolina. I was asked to talk a little bit about how I use the state standards in my curriculum. Anytime that I'm designing a unit of study, the first place I start is with the state standards. Anytime I am observed in my classroom, my administration always pulls up the state standards as a means to look at specifically what I am teaching my students. What are they expected to know and be able to do in my classroom? Testing and measurement obviously is very, very important, even in my theater arts curriculum. And with that, I look at the state standards, I look at the operative verbs, and I look at what the students are expected to be able to know and do. And with that, design assessments that best to measure that they have shown me those skills have been obtained. We are in the process of using the Understanding by Design, or UBD, methods here in Wake County, which is also incredibly helpful with looking at specifically the end result of a unit of study and going backwards and making sure that all the steps along the way make things happen. When it comes to looking at the state standards for theater arts, I certainly look at our 4 major strands over the course of the curriculum, the 4 major strands being communication, analysis, culture, and aesthetics. And with those 4, look specifically at what the needs are for each strand as they progress, of course, through the 4 different levels that we offer here at Green Hope High School. With regards to communication, both verbal and non-verbal communication strands are expected and seen throughout the state standards. And so with that, students will do things like monologue work and scene study, both contemporary and classical scene study in the classroom. We will do lots of work with pantomime and mask and other kinds of ways to really show that they have understood that. One of the strands that I particularly love is culture, as we look at how theater has impacted and influenced our society and American history and even world history over the course of time. This is particularly potent right now as we really start to look at how theater impacts our society, and specifically in terms of how it informs people or entertains people, gets people away and escape for a while, or really bringing people, the community a message or something that we want people to think about. We're looking at thousands of years at how theater has continued to shape and impact a society. What I particularly love about our state standards is that they give me an opportunity to really focus in on those issues and allow me to teach those kinds of ideas and concepts in the classroom. I find my students walk away from my classes not only feeling like they've become better theater artists, but become better people in general as they start to really learn and love and appreciate people from all walks of life, whether wherever they come from and what their background may be, and understanding that theater is a performing arts medium that really can bring a lot of people together for a common purpose and really putting the best of the human experience forward. Thank you.
All right, the last person we're going to hear from today is GUSSIE MARSHALLSEA, Visual Arts Educator.
Hi, my name is GUSSIE MARSHALLSEA and I am the visual arts teacher here at Pleasant Grove Elementary. Last year was my first year of opening up a brand new school. So I didn't know the students or their background, knowledge, skills, nor had I had the opportunity really to build relationships with the students. So I really started from scratch regarding my planning. This year is a little bit different because I have actually had the opportunity to build relationships and I have a better understanding of the students, their skills and their abilities. So I actually do keep a lot of records regarding the students, the class and the progress they're making. Power Schools is great because I can actually refer back to some of the lessons, the clarifying objectives that I used last year, and I'm able to build on those lessons. Here I keep a lot of records of how the class progressed. I have a lot of information on my summative assessments of the students and where I need to work with them to build skills. When I plan for lessons, I go directly to the North Carolina Essential Standards and I look at the Essential Standard. I also look at the clarifying objectives. State standards in math, language arts, in science to see where I can reinforce objectives with the students and assist them to make connections with their regular classroom. I ask myself when I'm planning, what do I want my students to know? What are their needs? What are the learning targets? How can I assist with making connections, making the material relevant or making the learning relevant to each child? Most of my units last about 4 weeks at the most, with each lesson introducing a new clarifying objective or introducing or building on it. I also have the specific objectives. So basically I have my essential standard, my clarifying objective, my skills for that particular day, or if there's an artist, vocabulary, and we also discuss why are we learning this. So after I've actually delivered the information and the students try what they've learnt, so they go and try it and experiment, then we do it together. So the next section we do together is here's where the students build on deeper understanding and the student work in their groups. And they experiment and they develop their skills and they think their ideas out. And they decide how they're going to go about creating their project with the actual learning targets and skills that they've been introduced at the beginning of the lesson. We have been focusing on the essential standard 2CX1, which is understand the global, historical, societal and cultural context of visual arts. The clarifying object for that is 2CX1.1. So that is exemplifying visual arts representing the heritage, customs and traditions of various cultures. So the learning target, or the I can statement that I do have up on the board for that, I can exemplify, or to put it in simpler terms for the grade 2 students, I can illustrate, I can demonstrate visual arts representing the heritage, customs and traditions of a various culture, which we focused in on Mexico.
Thank you for participating in the ArtsR4Life Virtual Professional Development Series module. This series is created in partnership between the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, A+ Schools of North Carolina, and the North Carolina Arts Council. Please help spread the word and tell your friends that the ArtsR4Life Virtual Professional Development Series is geared towards teachers, administrators, teaching artists, or anyone who wants to better understand the arts education essential standards, arts integration strategies, or how to effectively work with teaching artists in schools to support student understanding. There are up to 10 contact hours available for CEU credit with prior approval from the LEA or charter. This concludes the module.